By a margin of 7 votes, Bertie Ahern elected to the highest executive office in the state. The Taoiseach has been presented with his seal of office by President Robinson. PD leader Mary Harney will be Taoiseach and Minister for Enterprise, Employment and Trade. And 7 of the 14 deputies nominated to Cabinet are new to ministerial office. Good evening and welcome. 20 years in the Dáil, nearly 3 weeks in negotiations, and Bertie Ahern has been appointed Taoiseach. He was elected by the Dáil this afternoon by 85 votes to 78, and he received his seal of office from the President at Áras an Uachtaráin. Independent deputies Mildred Fox, Jackie Healy-Rae and Harry Blaney voted for Mr Ahern, as did Caoimhín Ó Caoláin of Sinn Féin. On his return to the Dáil from the Áras, the Taoiseach announced his 14 ministerial nominations. The debate on those nominations is continuing.
After 20 years in politics and a number of ministerial posts, Bertie Ahern has been preparing for this day for a long time. 2.5 years ago, he came within 12 hours of becoming Taoiseach. This morning, as he went on his regular jog with his running partner, Paddy Brazel, the memories of what happened when Dick Spring pulled the plug on him must have been uppermost in his mind. But if Bertie Ahern was apprehensive, he wasn't showing it. After his workout and some final preparations for the new Dáil session, the Fianna Fáil leader attended the ecumenical service for the new Dáil at Dublin Castle. Then, just after 2:30, as most of the media were focused on other arrivals, Mr Ahern and his 2 daughters, Georgina and Cecilia, arrived at Leinster House almost unnoticed.
Mr Ahern, can I just ask you very briefly, how do you feel? You seem to be on your own at the moment. Nobody seems to know you're even here. How do you feel? How do you feel?
I feel terrific. I decided not to come over until late, and I got on with things. I'm looking forward to it. I think the numbers are going to stack up okay, so it's a great honour of 20 years working in politics to get to today, so I'm very happy.
Do you think at this stage you're going to make it? I mean, you said to me at one stage you want to wait until your name is called.
Till I hear the Count Croyle announce it, then I can be convinced. But I think it's going to be all right. But needless to say, it's going to be a long day today to get myself elected and to get the government through, and I'm looking forward to that happening. And
what one message would you say to the people of Ireland today?
Well, I think it will be a great honour to be elected. I consider it a great privilege. I understand very much the responsibilities that rest on my shoulder on behalf of the people of Ireland, and I will do my utmost to make this a more inclusive society, a more tolerant society, and a society that understands all the people, and I'll certainly work at that, whatever period that I'm the Taoiseach of this country for.
How do you feel? How do you feel about it? Your father becoming Taoiseach?
I'm quite nervous
at the
same time, yeah.
Why are you nervous?
I don't know, it's just, it's
big day,
yeah, it's a very big day.
Seriously, why are you nervous? Did you ever believe that your father would become Taoiseach?
He deserves it, he's worked really hard, so yes, I do, yeah.
Can I ask the other daughter, how do you feel?
I'm very proud.
Are you?
Yeah.
Did you ever expect this day would come?
I hoped it would, yeah.
Anyway, so you're going to enjoy today, are you?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll let you go on.
Okay,
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Then, finally noticed by the media, he made his way into the Dáil chamber. Then, just after 5 o'clock, when the Ceann Comhairle read his name out, Mr Ahern finally achieved his ambition when he was elected Taoiseach. And outside the main entrance of Dáil Éireann on his way to Áras an Uachtaráin, Mr Ahern was surrounded by friends, colleagues and party well-wishers. And like other political leaders before him, he was now on his way to the Phoenix Park to receive his seal of office. At one stage he seemed to break free from those around him and moved towards the waiting media to say a few words to them.
We'll be back in a few minutes and then we'll get on with that. Thanks very much.
He arrived at Áras an Uachtaráin just before 6 o'clock, whereupon he immediately received his seal of office from President Robinson. This morning he began his day jogging in a quiet park in Drumcondra. Tonight he's fulfilled a lifelong political ambition and become Taoiseach.
In his final speech as Taoiseach, John Bruton wished the incoming government well. Mr Bruton said the new minority coalition should continue with some of the rainbow policies, including the proposals agreed with the British government on arms decommissioning.
There may have been an absence of drama, but there was a real sense of expectation as the 28th Dáil assembled to elect a new Taoiseach. The numbers of new faces and the absence of many familiar ones bore testimony to the carnage of the election and the uncertainty of political life. After the formal reading of the election results by Clerk of the Dáil Kieran Coughlin, Labour's Seamus Pattison, the longest-serving member of the House, was proposed for Cancoria by party leader Dick Spring and was elected unopposed. Mr. Spring then proposed John Bruton for the position of Taoiseach. Mr. Bruton, he said, had been an outstanding leader of government.
His contribution to policy in relation to Northern Ireland will stand the test of time, and indeed it is a mark of the man that right up to yesterday he has worked to sow the seeds of an inclusive peace and a fair settlement.
Democratic left leader Francis de Rossa backed the nomination with an attack on the incoming government's programme.
In general, Fianna Fáil appears to have dictated most of the policy positions. But in the area of taxation, Bertie Ahern, Deputy Bertie Ahern, seems to have surrendered totally to Deputy Harney, or perhaps it was surrender to Deputy McCreevy. We don't know yet.
Bertie Ahern's nomination as Taoiseach was proposed by David Andrews.
I know him to have the iron in his soul to be a great leader and to make this country of ours proud.
There is no doubt that in the challenging years which lie ahead, both nationally and internationally, a person with the calibre and character of Bertie Ahern is someone that this country can justly and will be proud of.
Progressive Democrats leader Mary Harney formally pledged her party's support to Bertie Ahern, and she spoke of yesterday's initiative on Northern Ireland.
I think at last it forces the Republican movement to make a stark choice between peace and democratic politics on the one hand, or violence on the other.
Then it was the turn of the Greens and the Independents to state their position. Support for Bertie Ahern came from Mildred Fox, Jackie Healy-Rae, Harry Blaney and Sinn Féin's Caoimhín O'Callaghan. Deputy Fox listed pledges on constituency issues she'd received from Mr Ahern. Jackie Healy-Rae read a long list of his demands.
I have all these matters discussed with Bertie Ahern.
On a vote, John Bruton's nomination was rejected by 87 to 75, and Bertie Ahern was elected Taoiseach by 85 votes to 78. Mr Bruton paid tribute to the incoming Taoiseach, who spoke of the honour conferred on him.
Having spent 20 years here, having had an interest in politics from a very young age, it is an honour that is hard to put into words, Cancoria, but an honour it really is.
For Bertie Ahern, it was a moment of triumph. The applause obliterating the memories of late 1994 when the job of Taoiseach was so suddenly snatched from his grasp.
At 7:30, the Dáil reconvened, and shortly afterwards Bertie Ahern announced his cabinet. He, of course, heads it as Taoiseach, while the PD leader Mary Harney becomes Taoiseach. She is also to be Minister for Enterprise and Employment, which will include responsibility for trade. Charlie McCreevy is the new Finance Minister. Ray Burke is Minister for Foreign Affairs, and John O'Donoghue is Minister for Justice. This portfolio will also incorporate equality and law reform. Micheál Martin becomes Minister for Education. Science and Technology will also come under this department. Brian Cowan takes over as Minister for Health with the added responsibility of Children's Affairs. Noel Dempsey is Minister for the Environment, and Dermot Ahern has responsibility for social welfare, including community and family affairs. Mary O'Rourke is Minister for Public Enterprise. This was formerly the Department of Transport, Energy and Communications. Joe Walsh is Minister for Agriculture, Food and Forestry, and David Andrews takes over at the Department of Defence. Michael Woods will be Minister at the Department of the Marine. Sheila De Valera will have responsibility for arts, heritage, the Gaeltacht and the islands, and Jim McDade has the tourism portfolio with responsibility for sport and recreation. Seamus Brennan will be Chief Whip as well as Minister of State at the departments of the Taoiseach and Defence. As expected, the PDs get another seat at the Cabinet table. It goes to Bobby Malloy, who will be Minister of State to the Government and to the Department of the Environment. And David Byrne has been appointed Attorney General.
Although she's one of the best-known politicians in the country, the new Taoiseach and Minister for Enterprise and Employment has no previous cabinet experience. Mary Harney's only service in government was as Junior Minister for the Environment in the last Fianna Fáil Progressive Democrat administration. First elected as a Fianna Fáil candidate in 1981, the PD leader is the first woman to hold the office of Taoiseach. As predicted, the finance portfolio goes to Charlie McCreevy, who has been the party spokesman in opposition. First elected in 1977, he was appointed to Cabinet by Albert Reynolds and has held the social welfare and trade and tourism portfolios. Foreign Affairs goes to Ray Burke, one of the most experienced members at the new Cabinet table. A Dáil deputy since 1973, he has served as Minister in 5 governments. Among the portfolios he's held are Justice, Communications and Industry and Commerce. Among the new faces at Cabinet is Social Welfare Minister Bertie Ahern, who served briefly as Chief Whip before becoming a casualty of Albert Reynolds' accession to the leadership. Party Whip under Bertie Ahern's leadership, he was one of the negotiators of the programme for the newly elected government. Bertie Ahern's colleague on those negotiations is the new Environment Minister Noel Dempsey, ironically the man who replaced him as Government Whip in 1992. Elected in 1987, he was Junior Minister for Defence as well as Government Whip from 1992 to 94. Another casualty of the Reynolds era, John O'Donoghue, has been given the Justice portfolio for which he was spokesman in opposition. First elected in 1987, he was appointed Junior Minister at the Department of Finance by Charles Haughey in late 91, but was demoted by Albert Reynolds. Although she's a new face to Cabinet, Sheila De Valera, the new Minister for Arts, Heritage and the Islands, is an experienced TD. First elected to the Dáil in 1977, she lost her seat in 81, but was re-elected in 87. After long years on the backbenches, she was promoted by Mr Ahern. It's no surprise that he has appointed her to his cabinet. No surprise either that Micheál Martin has been chosen for office. First elected in 1989, he's been an energetic spokesman on education over the last 2.5 years. His appointment will be seen as a reward for Cork City, which returned 6 Fianna Fáil TDs out of 10. Seamus Brennan, who had been on the front bench since Mr Ahern was made leader, is to be Government Whip. Former Minister for the Environment Michael Smith, who was also on the front bench, has been dropped from the Cabinet.
Well, there was something of a festive atmosphere at Leinster House this afternoon as deputies, along with their families and supporters, assembled for the first sitting of the new Dáil. A lot of the focus was on the independent TDs who would support Bertie Ahern and on the deputies arriving for the first time.
Some of the new TDs could hardly contain their excitement as they arrived at Leinster House. The Cork North West supporters of Michael Moynihan were in party mood as they danced outside the Dáil's front gates.
It was like a wedding in a household, the excitement and the phones and making sure we had tickets and everything organised.
Very historic day, actually, first woman ever for County Mayo to represent the county in Dáil Éireann, so I'm very excited about it.
As John Bruton prepared to step down, some of his papers were carried off by the wind. While the TDs and relatives arrived for the grand opening of the Dáil, the media spotlight was already moving off figures like Rory Quinn and his old Rainbow partner, Pontius de Rossa. As the minority partners in the new government arrived, new independent deputies explained why they were supporting Bertie Ahern.
We ended up with an agreement that we can both live with.
And how many millions extra is it for Wicklow and Carlow?
I'm not at liberty to say. I don't actually have a figure on them. But I would say this much, that the items which are on my list are items that should have been in Wicklow a long time ago.
We'll open a few dikes and fill a few potholes. and we'll work for the ordinary people of South Kerry.
And is it only
That's
dikes?
my duty here.
Is it only dikes and potholes that South Kerry's going to get?
We'll get a hell of a lot more as well as that.
Like what?
Oh!
We got to suppose what we asked for, and all we asked for really was a fair share of what's going, because we haven't got it over the last number of years.
However, the Socialist Party deputy wasn't supporting any of the large parties.
Well, I expect to be a strong voice for ordinary people power, for working class people, their problems.
Another piece of history this afternoon was when Caoimhín Ó Caoláin of Sinn Féin arrived to take his Dáil seat. He's the first member of his party in modern times to sit in the Dáil. And he was accompanied by Westminster MPs Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness. Mr Ó Caoláin said he would support the election of Bertie Ahern, but there had been no deals. He was asked about the possibility now of an IRA ceasefire.
Sinn Féin has been working towards the creation of the conditions that will move us all out of conflict and onto the pathway to a permanent peace, and that continues to be our focus as a party.
Some well-known faces were overjoyed at winning back their seats.
It's very, very good to be back. It's strange in a way. It's almost like coming back to school after a term, or maybe having missed out a term, which I did. And a marvellous sense of being part of the whole action again, because I didn't think I'd missed it, but I did.
And our political editor, Donal Kelly, joins us now from Leinster House. Donal, well, no great surprises in this evening's nominations to the Cabinet.
Not really, no great surprises in terms of the speculation at any rate over the last number of days, but it's an interesting blend of age, experience And one might say relative youth. The Fianna Fáil heavyweights are there, obviously, people like Ray Burke, Charlie McCreevy, Brian Coyne, Mary O'Rourke, David Andrews, all of whom have been close to Bertie Ahern during his period in opposition and prominent in the careful rebuilding of the party over the past couple of years. As against that, of course, you have 7 members of the cabinet who are full ministers for the first time, although people like Dermot Ahern and Noel Dempsey are vastly experienced. And the other thing to be said about it, as Cathy Herbert mentioned there in her package, that Cork gets its rewards for the extra seats it handed Fianna Fáil. Micheál Martin in the city, a full minister, and Joe Walsh from the rural areas, also a full minister.
And of course there has been a shake-up in the brief of a number of government departments.
Yeah, there are fairly substantial changes in the alterations to some departmental responsibilities, and some of these are already being severely questioned by the outgoing government parties. For instance, Dick Spring and John Bruton zeroed in particularly on David Andrews getting responsibility for European affairs. He's Minister for Defence, but he's also got this responsibility for European affairs, and that's under the direction of the new Minister for Foreign Affairs, Ray Burke, so he's not, David Andrews in that capacity wouldn't be reporting to the Cabinet. And Dick Spring has gone as far as to say that that may be, in fact, unconstitutional. There's also been criticism from the outgoing Rainbow parties of the abolition of the Department of Equality and Law Reform, as well as the linkage of agriculture and food.
And of course, Donal, finally, a comfortable enough margin for Bertie Ahern on the day. Does this augur well for long-term stability for the government?
Well, it is a minority coalition, as Bertie Ahern has acknowledged, but he does seem to have obtained commitments from independents like Jackie Healy-Rae and Mildred Fox. Indeed, it was noticeable that both of them in their maiden speeches talked of the 5-year period for the new Dáil. But as we all know from past experience, the one thing about politics is its unpredictability. A minority government which can only impose a whip on its constituent parties is obviously always going to be at risk. And in many ways, the man with the really tough job is the government chief whip, Seamus Brennan.
Donal, thank you for that. And there we take a break. Coming next in the 9 o'clock news, we look back at how the new Taoiseach rose through the ranks. And a year on, the legacy of Veronica Guerin.